Good evening and welcome to this independence debate. And tonight, very much hopefully, we're going to get an opportunity for some veterans to have a say on why they are voting for independence. However, before we actually start tonight, what I'd like to do is hold a minute's silence for all those that have lost their lives in conflicts past and conflicts present. So if you're able to, could you please stand? If sitting is more comfortable, please do so.
I've been asked this week, in no uncertain terms, why someone who served in the British Army would want their country to be independent. My response to that is, if I go back to the last unit I served in, is possibly I could ask my Jamaican Lance Corporal, or my Pakistani Sergeant, or my South African Captain, who have no problems whatsoever wearing the uniform of the British Army and still belonging to a country that's independent. I then get asked, but what about the Queen? You swore allegiance to the Queen. What about, how does that affect the referendum? And I point out that the Queen is the monarch of 16 other countries as well, many of whom also wear the uniform of the British Army.
They like to give the impression that after Scotland becomes an independent country, we will turn into some sort of North Korea. I can assure you that an independent Scotland will take its strategic position relative to the North Sea and the Iceland Gap very seriously, and its responsibilities to its friends, its allies, and its neighbours. No campaign will say, well, what about your Scottish Navy? A couple of ships at Faslane. How are you going to defend the East Coast? Well, at the moment, we're in a country called the UK, and all the conventional warships are based on the South Coast. So it begs the question now, who's defending the North Coast of this country? And from some of the reports we saw in the news last year, it would appear that Whitehall are defending our North Coast via Twitter. We laugh, but we are a maritime nation, and it is ludicrous that in a maritime nation we do not have a major conventional warship based in Scotland. We do not have an amphibious capability in Scotland with the loss of our Royal Marines from Arbroath. And we, Scotland and the UK, with the loss of Nimrods, have no maritime patrol aircraft capability. Now, I have a friend of mine, he's still serving, so we'll call him Dave for argument's sake. I said to my friend, I says, where is our maritime patrol aircraft capability coming from now? Who is doing that anti-submarine warfare surveillance to the north of Britain? And he said, nobody is. We're wide open. It's getting to the point now where if we did have people invading Scotland, we have two options. We stick a pitchfork in their eye, or we nuke them. People say, how are we going to afford defence in an independent Scotland? Well, that is to imply that we are currently getting our defence free from Whitehall. We will get our defence and pay for our defence the way we pay for it now, and that's through our taxes. We raise in excess of £3 billion per annum in Scotland towards the UK defence budget, and only about £1.9 billion is spent here. So if we spend somewhere in between, £2.5 billion, comparable to places like Denmark, Norway, Finland, etc., we will actually get more defence for less. Large defence companies have seen their business in Scotland contract over the last 20 years, while the Ministry of Defence down south ring-fences money for US-based Trident defence contractors. And when it comes to small to medium-sized defence companies, they have been completely overlooked by Whitehall, where only 1% of such contracts come to Scotland.
Yeah, I served in the military, and I still keep to those values. I served 2 tours in Iraq. I've seen firsthand some not nice sights. That was my job. I accepted that at the time. It's now no longer my job. I also believe that if we have a Scottish Defence Force. We don't have to be strong-armed by America and the likes to go to these places. I always say it as, I think Bill Bailey, the comedian, described it best, is where he said, America's like this big bully going around picking on everybody, saying, give me your sweets, and Britain's standing behind them going, yeah, because that's all they seem to do, you know?
Wars are never ever fought for glory or for queen and country, they're all fought for money. I want the money. The mega rich guys are financing the wars, you know. I listened to a former British ambassador today, and he was talking about, he was ambassador to Kazakhstan, and we're building a pipeline for Kazakhstan through Uzbekistan, through Afghanistan and all the rest of it. And the people they had to pay, bribe and all that to get this stuff through, and when it came to Afghanistan, it came to a kind of hiccup. So they approached the Taliban to see if they would protect the pipeline going through Afghanistan, and they wouldn't have it. So they approached this other guy who was the head of a kind of clan. His name was Karzai. So they bribed him and they made him the president of the country, and he got his forces to defend the pipeline that was running through. So all the big money men were paying for this gas to go from A to B, and it didn't matter who died as long as it got there, as long as they were making their buck at the end of the day. And it's these people in this country that are making millions, no, billions. And it's Cameron and all his cohorts that are selling off the National Health Service. You're going to have to go along in a few years' time, and you go in for treatment, they're not going to say, what's wrong with you? They're going to say, have you got your credit card? They'll be wanting that first because you'll need to pay for your treatment, and that's the way the NHS is going. Everything's getting privatised. And you want to know how I'm voting yes? That's why. I'm voting a big yes, and I'll stay with it. Thanks very much.
I see a parallel between Westminster's Jam Tomorrow promised powers with that of the Military Covenant, which came into being in 2000. For those of you who don't know, the Military Covenant is an agreement between the state, the government, and on the behalf of the people, to look after soldiers in particular, right, who've been to battle, okay? So that military covenant came into being in 2000, right? Yet in 2007, we still needed charity to look after our war veterans who'd lost their limbs and lost their minds, okay? In the service of the United Kingdom. Help for Heroes is a wonderful charity, brilliant charity. I've done a lot for it. I'd like to think I have. But the fact is, in 2014, so another 7 years after that charity came into being, we still need them. Our veterans still need them. It's disgusting. Now, that comparison, the Military Covenant and the powers tomorrow, or the jam tomorrow, I think that typifies what a promise from Westminster, from Whitehall, actually means.
We're all talking here about Scotland, and we're all ex-British Army or Navy or Air Force, and not one of us will say a bad thing about the British Armed Forces. But we want our own Scottish Defence Force in an independent Scotland to defend our land, our air and our sea.
So when I left the army, like yourself there, I joined the SNP. Right? I'm quite happy to admit that. Right? And for the last 10 years, I've been a member of the SNP. And I have really gone through and really researched things, and I cannot find any argument that holds water to why we should not be independent. We have got absolutely everything going for us. We have human resources. We have natural resources. We've got our normal Scots attitude to doing things. Yeah. So why are we being held back by a government we don't vote for? And who are basically only interested in serving the City of London.
So the other commitment that we will make, we first of all said there will be no compulsory redundancies for a Scottish Defence Force. If you sign a contract, whether it's 5, 7, 9, 22 years, Provided nothing else happens that jeopardises that, we will see out that contract. There'll be no compulsory redundancies, and that's part of the extraordinary commitment we think we should have. And the last thing I would say is, for those that have suffered that, and there's been thousands in recent years, for those that have suffered compulsory redundancy in the armed forces, I would say with the establishment, in 3 weeks' time we could be looking at this, establishment of a Scottish Defence Force, you should feel free, having been made compulsory redundant and wanted to stay in the military, to come forward and join that Scottish Defence Force. I think we've got a fantastic future with independence. Thank you.
Independence is an opportunity to do things different. We don't have to copy what Westminster did, and that's the last thing they want to do. And I was thinking of that in terms of a Scottish Defence Force before I came here tonight. I'm like, what would my vision be of a Scottish Defence Force? Well, the forces have got lots and lots of skills that are easily transferable. And the forces, part of the problem of the forces is practising these skills. There's no point sitting in barracks month in, month out. You've got to get out and practice it. And I was thinking that the Royal Engineers, part of the British Army just now, they have all the skills, the knowledge and the equipment. They can fly in someplace, build a runway, build roads, put up a tented camp, field hospitals and stuff like that. They can make these camps. Now, why wouldn't it be absolutely wonderful if these skills were practised throughout the world, and that they could fly in somewhere and build a hospital and roads and tented camps for refugees and all the rest of it? And wouldn't it be just great if you were watching the news at night on the TV and there was guys with saltires on their arms, the jocks being the first in, as we always were, and this time for a good reason, to sit and watch television and watch refugees being sheltered and housed by Scottish forces across the world without any preemptive, you must be with us. It would just be the Scottish forces be a force for good throughout the world, and let's help people rather than going out the world and killing them.
We've shown so far that we can improve the lot of veterans in Scotland, and we have plans to improve that even further. The establishment of a Scottish Veterans Commissioner, the establishment of the Scottish Veterans Fund, improvements to health and housing. I think these are all things which we've improved, but we can improve them far more if we have the full powers of independence. Well, I've had some very powerful explanations of veterans tonight who've come to the conclusion that independence represents the best option for them and the journeys they've made to do that. I would suggest those people should look at the film from tonight's event, and they'll see the diversity of views which people that are supporting independence, coming from a service background, have. I think it's a better lot for our armed forces. They can make sure they're not made compulsory redundant when they're serving on the front line. They can look after their families better. So I think independence makes a great deal of sense for somebody having served in the armed forces.
When we join the forces, we swear allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. What we're voting for on the 18th of September is a political change. It's not a change in monarchy or a change in a head of state. It's a change in our political stance. So saying that you're not going to vote yes purely because you served in the army or forces is a bit of a nonsensical answer. I mean, there's something else going on there. Yes, there's a certain amount of indoctrination within the forces that, you know, it's Britain, the UK and all our glorious history et al. Yeah. But if you see past that, then it's just a political question. Should Scotland be an independent nation? Yes.
In independent Scotland, the Scottish Defence Forces will be set military tasks like any defence forces or armed forces, and the military tasks set for Scottish Defence Force will be very similar to those currently set for the UK Armed Forces, things like defending the sovereign territory, coming to the aid of civil authorities in times of crisis. But there will be one fundamental difference. Where the UK Armed Forces are currently set the task of projecting global power, I look forward to the day when the Scottish Defence Forces in an independent Scotland are set the military task of projecting global justice and peace.